whole COVID response. Palantir was in charge of like deciding who gets the vaccine first. They held all of the COVID data, not just for the US, but also the United Kingdom. And then started surveilling sewage systems throughout the United States, literally resurrecting an old like total information awareness program from 2003 called biosurveillance. Same thing. I mean, honestly, it's pretty insane when you consider how involved Palantir was, but it hasn't really gotten a lot of coverage. And I think also, yeah, like Mark said, Trump has definitely gotten a pass about a lot of the warp speed stuff. And I know that a lot of people who like Trump try and dismiss it as like, oh, he had bad people last time, or he listened to the wrong people. But I mean, I don't know if you can really have it both ways. I mean, what's going on right now sort of reminds me a lot of what happened with like lefties during the Obama era. Everyone's energized during the first campaign, hope and change. And then he's a complete disappointment when he's like actually in office. And then when it comes to the second campaign before the second term, you know, all these people on the left being like, oh, well, it was the Republicans, or he didn't have the right people, or these people weren't helping him. Meanwhile, we find out later that his entire cabinet from the off was chosen by Citigroup in the immediate aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, right? Among all these other things that we know since then, right? So it's sort of like that same type of wishful thinking, you know, either, you know, Trump is the guy that's going to fight the deep state and win, or he's this guy that like, you know, is beholden to the people he surrounds himself with and has no agency. It's kind of hard to argue both, in my opinion. And I mean, if you're talking about, you know, having all, you know, extreme Peter Thiel influence in the next Trump administration, and then, you know, people like Jamie Dimon are being floated, it's like, oh, he's going to surround himself with better people this time. They're also like floating Eric Prince as head of the Pentagon, the Blackwater founder, who's been going on this like PR tour all over the place, trying to like frame himself as like something else, you know. He's a CIA asset. It's a documented thing, guys. So yeah, I don't know. And he also was like super involved with the Chinese government through Frontier Services Group, Prince. So I don't know. How does that grok with the China bad stuff from the, you know, the Trump rhetoric? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, the private sector coup is here, and I think we're agreeing to it passively through unread user agreements on all of these data broker sites, and also just passiveness to, you know, the ghouls that are getting let into the administration. I mean, I think there's just, you know, people are so focused on Trump and, you know, how his rhetoric and how he's so funny and he owns the libtards and all this stuff. But like, you know, he's surrounding himself with some of the worst people that are quite literally part of the privatized CIA, now kind of coming back and using the government, you know, to basically use regulation to kingmake and make a ton of money by allowing the services that they provide, the infrastructures that they provide, whether it's data, whether it's stable coins, whether it's whatever, to be king-made via regulation, to basically, again, do the Thiel thing and find a market and dominate it. And become a monopoly. I mean, literally, Thiel says this. I mean, he writes this in his book. You know, competition is bad for profits. Go find a thing that no one is dominating and dominate it and become a monopoly. And then move on to the next one. Competition's bad. So that's not free market. You know, that's not this, you know, badass Austrian economic, whatever, hoo-ha-rah, that shit that they're selling us. It's not that. This is literally, how do we build monopolies under the guise of the free market, and then actually use the government to, you know, give us a bunch of contracts to feed on, government contracts.
Yeah, and expand their power and keep them monopolies, right? Government sanctioned monopolies, essentially. And I think it's useful to frame this sort of as the public-private partnership, which is, you know, directly related to what a lot of people have known about U.S. politics for a long time, the revolving door. A lot of these people and interests are in public sector when convenient, then they move to the private sector when convenient. And I think, you know, what the setup here is, and what it has been, you know, we've been talking about it probably for most of this year, especially with like a lot of the Larry Fink stuff in Bitcoin that happened earlier this year, is the idea of sort of trying to move, now that, you know, the public sector is unpopular, move it back to the private sector and frame, that's I'm sure a big reason why Eric Prince is, being considered for the Pentagon, because he's been on during Trump's first administration was pushing to essentially privatize the entire national security state, both the intelligence and military communities. So is it, better, will all our problems go away if the official CIA is dissolved, but we have a private CIA led by former CIA assets like Eric Prince and stuff? I don't necessarily think that's true. And is it really, again, it's not free market, private sector. The US has essentially been a crony capitalist economy for a very long time. And and people have argued too that a lot of famous American capitalists have direct relationships with, the Chinese government and rave about China. Everyone from, the Rockefeller family to Larry Fink. And if you honestly look at how China has developed as an economy, it's focused on creating using government control to have a centralized control economy. And that's why you have people like Larry Fink saying markets love totalitarian governments, because it reduces risk for them, right? And makes it easier to trade when you know what's going to happen. And that's part of the utility of something like Palantir as well, that's supposed to predict everything before it happens. There's a lot of, they view that as sort of like a market intelligence thing, I would assume anyway. So I think we're, sort of being pushed in that direction. I think